Hi, everybody. Welcome to Beyond the Pivot, which is a podcast that runs you through the life of the entrepreneurs. And here we discuss the entrepreneur ecosystems in Africa and in Europe. Martin, very happy to see you again for our second episode. I'm super excited about it. How's been your week?
Oh, thank you, Cabral, for welcoming me. I cannot believe we have made it so far. Second episode recording. My week has been pretty good. It's last few days that is sunny and shiny outside. Winter is coming, and so I'm trying to enjoy every moment of sun that I can. And what about you? Anything exciting happening in Zambia?
Yes, last week we were celebrating our 60th independence as a country, so that was something pretty exciting. This week has been quite busy at the Hive, just trying to close off the year strong. So that has been keeping us going. Yeah, but over a good week, beginning to get into our rainy season, so it's been getting cool and some rains pouring here and there. We've had a drought for quite a number of years. Last year we had a drought, very terrible drought. And we're hoping and expecting that this year will be better and we can have some rainfall coming through. Yeah. Any news from Europe?
Well, what's new in what's new in Europe? Well, I found two interesting things to me that will be, I would say, quite significantly influencing our economy. And the first one is that Volkswagen is closing 3 factories that produce, Volkswagen cars in Germany, and they are laying off thousands of people and cutting salaries by 10% of everybody else. Why it's important is that our economy, or the Czech economy, is mostly export based, and most of our exports, like dominant number, is going to Germany, and dominant number of those is going to like manufacturing, because in Czech Republic we have this giant plant. I would say it is the biggest employer is Skoda Cars, which belongs to Volkswagen. So if Volkswagen in Germany and German economy altogether is doing badly, it might signify that we will not be too far behind them, and maybe if they sneeze, we will have some kind of sickness that's worse than a cold.
I hear you.
So that's something to keep an eye on. And following on our latest episode, when we talk about the development of e-commerce in Zambia, connecting to mobile money and young people getting more access to internet and to mobile phones. I just read that Czech company from Prague is now working for the past several years with Netbank in South Africa, which is South African bank. It's not in Zambia, but it's in Zimbabwe, it's in Namibia, Botswana, South Africa, of course, and Angola, Mozambique, and other countries. And they started to create for them some kind of user experience, like bank user experience. And throughout the time, that work developed into creating, as they call it, like super app. And this super app is, they want to create a rival to Amazon or to Alibaba and Alipay and all these services, but based in Africa for Africans, which I thought is very interesting, because as we talked about, it has its specificities, just like mobile money. Where else can you find such a thing? And they are creating this app that would allow sellers to post their services and products there, from restaurants to solar panel installations, as well as customers to shop there, and the Netbank then getting fees from the payments themselves. Currently, they have already more than 1 million users, and they are spreading to Namibia. So keep an eye on that.
Is that in South Africa alone, the million users?
Exactly. That's what they said in the article. So they said they have 1 million registered users, even though the active users could be a little less. But that's already a proven concept for them, that they should spread to different countries. So I would be on the lookout for them, and maybe that's a sign that e-commerce is growing in South Africa, or not just in South Africa, but in that region, and people should take notice.
I think just some insights to share, maybe in line with large companies getting into, or startups from other countries getting into African countries. Last week, we just learned that Yango was suspended in Togo. So for those that do not know, Yango is a almost like a subsidiary of Yandex, which has ties in Russia, of course. Recently, they had a tough time in Europe as a ride-hailing service because of the recent war in Ukraine. But ever since that, they did quite push their market entry and penetration in Africa and have been quite in a number of African countries. But the suspension in Togo, of course, comes with claims for anti-competitive behavior. And so Yango are famous for that. Well, they're quite aggressive in their marketing. For example, in Zambia, the time that they launched, we had one local ride-hauling app called Olendo.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time that Yango launched, imagine a ride, about a 10-kilometer ride would cost, how much would that be? Let me do your conversion. About a quarter of a dollar, like 20 cents,
Mm-hmm.
about for a 10-kilometer ride, which was like really insane and crazy. So everybody was jumping on board. And what has ended up happening over the years is they killed that local competition, which is a local startup. So speaks to that as well, where we have these companies entering our communities. I think there is a need for us. When I was reading this, I was just reflecting about the need for us to also be deliberate about protecting local innovation and local startups as well. It's great that we're having all of this intervention and influx of these other international companies, but I think each country and government needs to play a role in protecting local businesses. Yeah, so that's something that I saw as some news to share, and I think it ties well with what you were talking about. What's interesting though is I'm curious because Amazon as well just launched in South Africa. I think earlier this year. That was April, right? The other startup are claiming that they will be the Amazon of Africa, and I'm like, oh, Amazon is also here, right? It will be
Yeah, yeah.
interesting to see how that also plays out. Yeah,
Exactly what you just mentioned. I was trying to read the comments of this article, and
yeah.
everybody was mentioning like a good luck against Amazon and good luck against Alibaba. I'm sure the Chinese will let you just swoop in, and
Exactly.
such a comment. So I think it will be harder than it sounds on paper, but perhaps if they can have local management or local, maybe focus on the countries like Zambia, Zimbabwe, smaller markets that are not that interesting for Amazon. I feel like their main target will be to be in South Africa. Then they have a chance. Competing with Amazon, which can do definitely what you just described with Yango, will be hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, maybe bringing it to today's episode two.
Mhm.
Super excited about this because it's an interesting topic. And today we're talking about breaking stereotypes, right? So stereotypes around the African investment landscape, perceptions from Europe, perceptions from Africa as well, which is pretty interesting. And maybe I'd like you to kick us off, Martin. What do you think are some of the most common assumptions or stereotypes investors have or tend to have about Africa?
Well, based on my own experience, I already inherited about 4 crowns to 4 different kingdoms in Africa, based on the emails I received. And I think my family is very lucky because even my grandma and a lot of my friends are trying to get on the same throne based on the emails we got. So I think a lot of people imagine African startups and African businesses being these farms that send out these emails that you just need to send $1,000 and you can claim your new Mercedes Benz alongside with your throne to, I'm gonna name Burkina Faso because this is the last one I received that I'm inheriting that throne. Therefore, that's one of the biggest stereotypes there is. And alongside with that is that nobody really believed that there could be money made as an investor. I don't say anybody, nobody. A lot of people don't believe that. They always feel like, oh, it's just, it's an aid or it's like play money, be ready to use it all. In the end, I believe you have to always be ready to lose it all because it is a risky investment to invest money in any startup, not just in African startup. And these two stereotypes come with not knowing enough about the differences between the countries, and secondly, by the low exposure to even African businesses' success stories. Nobody really knows the success stories or what
Yeah.
startup made it, which one is in Silicon Valley. Nobody knows the stats. Everybody sees Africa as a continent, not individual countries, and they also see it as something that's poor, people that are usually young, the horrible stories in the news, but not as a land of opportunity.
Great. I mean, like like you rightly put it, almost everybody that emails, they would like to state that they're a king in Africa or a prince, and they've got this land. So it's quite the classic scam. I do know on our end as well. Maybe you have received this before. There's this dying widow somewhere who claims that the husband left her so much money. And just please reach out, and we would like to invest in your cause and stuff. And you can get it that this is a scam. Actually, interestingly enough, I just saw a post in our company WhatsApp group about how this individual was saying the company posted a $20 voucher, and I clicked to claim it. But apparently, it just turned out that it was the IT team. It was a phishing test, and
Oh
now I
yeah.
have to do a whole refresher onboarding on how to not click on scams online. Yeah, so like you rightly said, it's coming from a place of lack of stories, success stories, people learning about the ecosystems. How do I go about my due diligence if I needed to do that about a startup so that I do not find myself in this position where I'm being scammed? Yeah,
True. And based on what you are saying, it just doesn't happen to me. They are also trying that you live in Zambia. So even you can
absolutely.
be the king of Burkina Faso one day if you try hard.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So
absolutely right.
what do you think? What do you think on side are the biggest stereotypes that you have to debunk when talk to Japanese investors, you
Yeah.
talk to investors from all around the world that are interested in startups. So what is the wall that you are hitting the most?
Yeah. I mean, wouldn't say it's a stereotype. Yeah, I think it could be a stereotype, but there is a sense that there's very little going on in Africa, which is not true, right? People have got very little information about Africa, and that in itself even limits the opportunities that entrepreneurs in Africa can actually go after, right? So, in a case of African entrepreneurs, you will find that even when they start beginning to engage investors or potential partners from across the globe, be it in Japan, be it in Europe, one common theme that you see is you need to firstly provide the entire background of your market, right? Like it's almost like you're starting from scratch. No one understands where you are. If I say, in fact, even a whole country like Zambia, few people know about my country, Zambia, and it's almost a case of you need to provide that background context to paint that problem and picture for where you are exactly. And it's even more difficult to paint a picture for where you're trying to go for the future. So that in itself, I think, gets even in the way for African startups to access some of these opportunities that are out there in comparison to other entrepreneurs in other markets. It's almost like, hey, I understand the context, and hey, can we get go where are we going with the future? But that's not the case for African entrepreneurs. Yeah.
I would say that's a very similar problem that we as Europeans are facing towards Americans. Because when you
Mm,
say to an American guy or girl that you
yeah.
are from Czech Republic, first they never heard of that country, so they think that's somewhere near Russia. Secondly, they think it's the Czechoslovakia, which broke in
Mm,
40 years ago into two different countries.
mm,
So I definitely feel connected to you in that way that every single conversation starts. You don't have to be scared. We still have the same cars, the life works the same way. And there's the
yeah,
size of a market. People are trying to build something. And we are a safe
absolutely.
country in Europe. You guys, the safe country in Zambia. So,
Yeah,
well, in
absolutely. And
Africa, sorry.
adding to that,
Yeah.
yeah, adding to that, I think we talked about this in the first episode, and I think that's where this particular conversation comes in very handy, and it's very important because we are the ones responsible for telling the story about Africa, about Czech Republic, right?
Hmm.
If we are not telling these stories to the world, no one will tell the stories, right? And no one will hear about us, and no one will ultimately be interested to even collaborate and work with us. So there is a responsibility, and if we do not do that, shine a light on our own ecosystems and economies or landscapes that we have, those success stories, these perceptions and stereotypes will be prolonged in perpetuity, and we will not see the progress that we'll seek to make. And I think there's power in collaboration. We can go alone. I think, like I say, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you have to go further, you have to go together, right? So there's
Hmm.
point collaboration, and this collaboration doesn't just have to be locally, but it has to be international as well. So that's our responsibility to end some of these perceptions. Yeah.
So to follow up on that, do you have any success story that you can share with us that will start breaking these stereotypes?
Absolutely. I mean, locally, I'm able to, and I hope we bring this guy on the podcast, by the way. Lupiya, I think for us has been a great example from Zambia, right? Fintech started with just offering financial services to informal retailers for fruits and vegetables. These are usually women in local markets. The markets can be in our own neighborhoods. And that's where they started, just offering these loans and testing out the financial sector of providing access to finance and credit to marginalized communities, right? And from that, they've now grown to an online platform that offers financial services totally online where the vetting happens and provide these loans to businesses and individuals through their platform. Their recent fundraise was $8 million and it's been across from partners from across the world. And they continue fundraising so that they can scale in other countries. I think I mentioned already in Zambia, they just expanded to Tanzania. It should have been early this year, if not a few weeks ago. And that in itself is a success story. And I think it ties within the conversation that we're having. What success looks like for us, since people always claim, well, not always claim, we are a small country by population relative to the other big nations in Africa. Our value proposition is because we're at the center, a landlocked country with about 9 or 8 neighbors. My geography is, I'm forgetting my geography. It should be 9 neighbors. Our value and strength is expanding to these other regions that are we are surrounded by, and so that's a great success story. They've already been applying continental competition. For example, GITEX, which is one of the large startup conference happening usually in Morocco. There's one that happens in Dubai. They won that competition as a top startup. So you can see that this is a startup that's solving a real need and solving a real problem locally, and they're able to provide a competitive product even on a continental and global stage. So that in itself is a success story, and I'm hoping we can bring Muchu, the CTO. He's a great guy and co-founder of the startup in one of our episodes. So look out for that. And yeah, we'll keep, I think, digging out more success stories so that you can appreciate what's happening, not just in Zambia. Let's see if we can even bring in more startups from other African countries as well. Yeah.
You just mentioned great success story of somebody who grew on a local problem, became a camel,
Yeah.
and therefore it was customer funded in the beginning,
Yeah.
and then got venture capital, I assume, of the $8 million to spread to different countries, because I feel that need could be universal, not just Zambia specific. And if I would be asked in an email to invest in a startup, what should I be aware of? How should I vet the startup?
Mm.
Kind of, what would you describe the vetting process should be?
Yeah. I mean, great question. I think that there isn't much difference in the vetting process as itself. I think for our markets, you just need to be a bit more thorough. And what I mean by that, depending on your interest and stage at which you're investing, the vetting process might be different, right? And for those at early stage, there's a particular process that might apply that's totally different for mature stages where looking at acquiring or getting shares in a larger startup. But if definitely you're at the initial early stages, and I think maybe that's where the conversation could be right now, where someone has got either a prototype that they recently launched or at market validation phases, I think a key stage that you need, a key thing that you really need to be looking at is, I think, validating that there's actually been even some form of customer traction. Firstly, before we even get to customer traction, just getting past the relevant basic registration documents, right? I think that could be a challenge for you, for example, since you do not know the registration agencies in these countries. But I think in Zambia, we have an online system, luckily. I'm not sure if that could be the case across Africa, where you're able, based on the registration number or company registration name, you're online able to check if this company is registered, because that would be a starting point, right? The next bit, if you're aligned with the problem that this particular startup is solving or entrepreneur is solving, you believe in their mission. We've identified and found that certain entrepreneurs have mastered the art of pitching to a point that they're always pitching for these grants, yet they're never building. Okay. So it's a case of they've mastered a great pitch, they'll pitch to you, story is so touching, but there's nothing happening on the ground from an execution standpoint. So you also want to vet actual customer traction, and this is where I was going. You want to see that there's been some growth. There are customers that are actually paying, and there are repeat customers that are coming through. And if you can probe from anything that could give you that financial insight into that particular metric, I think then you will be investing into a startup that's actually doing something on the ground that's potentially scalable. Like I said, also working through business incubators. I think I mentioned this last time. Could be part of your vetting process. Is the startup related or aligned to a particular local angel? Sorry, not local angel investment network, but more of a local accelerator or incubator, because that shows you that this is a startup that has had some level of technical training or business services support, and they understand their growth trajectories and journey. So those could be that could be my approach again towards just ensuring that you are vetting the startup. Please focus on real traction and not just listening to a great pitch. Many people have mastered that, and they will be feeding on either your sympathy because they've told this sad story, painted this dark picture, and you feel like you need to do a part. But customer validation is always the best. Yeah.
I feel like that there could be information disconnect. Like you said, I wouldn't know where to go to look for the information if the company is registered. I wouldn't even know that I should ask for it. Secondly, you say like get the information about the traction if they're actually making any money, even small money. But if they are having some customers, would you ask for bank information, bank statements, or is there some kind of mobile money statement? Because in Zambia, people can just turn into customers by paying you through their mobile phone. Therefore, I don't think there is some big record of that. So what kind of, if we would have to say three pieces of paperwork that could be universal across different countries, should people ask for?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I totally understand that information disconnect. And like I said, we're lucky on our side because we have that online check-in platform from the Patents and Company Registration Authority agency, PACRA. So the equivalent for other countries, I think, is something that you need to be looking at. And I think that's where the incubator gets to come in handy. Okay. An example at Bongo Hive, I think prerequisite or basic entry level into our program would be that registration document for most of the programs that we run. So you do know that anyone within our pipeline, you would be getting that level of vetting or due diligence pass, right? So that's why I keep emphasizing on the incubator. In terms of customer numbers or traction, I think that depends on the level of investment that you're trying to make. But I think if really the founder is serious, I know, of course, a bank statement could be something that's very sensitive, but I think if a founder is really serious, and depending on the size of the investment that you're making, if they are comfortable, a bank account would be something that shows you. Right now, the mobile money platforms do provide a statement like you have. And that's the beauty about mobile money. It gives you that digital statement. For the unbanked, even people in rural areas, you get that receipt for every payment that you got. But also, if they're able to track some management accounts, I think that could also be great. If you're able to talk to potential customers that have previously worked with a startup, all those could be points of connection for you to just understand and begin to understand the customer traction that they're making on the ground. But trust me, after talking to many startups, for me, it becomes very clear that this startup hasn't made any customer traction when you ask very specific questions. Okay, what are your unit economics? Can you break it down for me? What's your average lifetime value of a customer? What's your average customer spend on your platform? You will see that they're just making up stuff. I've gotten to a point where I can tell like someone is making stuff up, but that wouldn't be the case for anyone who's beginning on this journey. And that's why I advise those channels for just vetting and potential due diligence as well. Yeah.
Thank you. You mentioned the network of African incubators. I believe they are called AfriLabs, and there are 600 of them. Yeah. So we can put a link to them in our description later on, so we can maybe start looking for your opportunities with them.
Absolutely.
Connected to this issue is now I know a lot of information about the startup. I decided whether to invest or not. If I decided to invest, what is the next step? So I decided I want to invest.
Mm.
I saw all the paperwork. I saw that it's a legitimate business. I believe in the opportunity. I believe there could be money be made, and I have the money in my bank account. So what is the next step in my path? Is there some kind of specific paperwork that needs to be signed because I am not a Zambian national, or is there some specific contract? Should I maybe start looking into the political situation and the laws of the country, if it's even allowed? Maybe some
Yeah.
countries do not allow entry of foreign money. So what
Mm.
would you do next after you decide,
Yeah.
yes, I'm going for it?
I would be happy to provide a more uh, or regulatory exact prescribed procedure, but unfortunately, I'm not an expert from that perspective. But I do know from recent deals that we have, Zambia has been quite flexible in terms of allowing money to flow in and out of the country. I think we're one of the easiest countries where you're able to bring in your money, make an investment, and also pull your cash out. Depending on the ticket size, I think an investor is able to also get some tax breaks as high as 5 years, depending again on the investment size that they get to make into a company or setting up a company within the country. So basically, for startups, as we try, actually, we're in the process of trying to create a regulatory framework. I don't know if I mentioned this, which is the Startup Act. And I
Mhm.
hope that that guides also further into how exactly we'll be making most of these investments. But right now, it's been very easy for startups to facilitate those investments and get money wired from an investor directly into their startup accounts.
In a in your experience, just in Bongo Hive, uh, do a lot of startups that come from rural area join you? Because you are based in Lusaka, and I believe Lusaka is a big city of its own. You are one
Yeah.
of the few, maybe only one, that does this work in Lusaka. And I believe it's very hard for people from outside Lusaka to travel there. So
Mm.
are you able to cover them, or are you missing right now an opportunity maybe in those rural areas just because they do not know about you? Maybe they have no
Yeah.
way of knowing, and therefore, even if we break these stereotypes today, there's still some gem people that could be found outside of the capital cities.
Yeah. Great question. I mean, from an ideology perspective, maybe it's not an ideology perspective or value perspective. How do I say this? Okay, let me let me give you some background. So I think that for startups to thrive in any particular area, be it an urban area or a rural area, there is need for certain infrastructure to be in place. Okay. This could be internet infrastructure, facilities, access to talent. Those types of conditions make it easier for startups to thrive. And unfortunately, in rural areas, there are limited options for what's available for startups. So that makes it a lot difficult for anyone to start a startup in a rural area. Our approach to supporting rural enterprises or creating impact in rural communities is not that we train rural and it's not that we train startups in those communities, but typically our approach has been that we support startups that have got rural influence. So a startup might be based in an urban area, but if their influence and target customers or approaches, be it from a supplier perspective, is in the rural area, we'll then support them because ultimately what we find is there is concentrated resources within the capital areas, like Lusaka in a case, and therefore that enables them to access a lot more resources that keep them thriving and growing. So that has been our approach instead of necessarily primarily focusing on startups in the rural areas. We support startups with rural impact. That doesn't mean we do not go out in rural areas. Like I said, it's not just technology startups that we get to support. We've also seen the need for micro, small, and medium enterprises, the traditional businesses, right? And so we've been approached by many partners that are saying, hey, let me give a quick example. We're working with the National Technology Business Center on a project that's funded by the Italian government to set up a rural off-grid mini grid, solar mini grid in
Mhm.
this community called Magodi Village. So initially when they set it up, it was highly misused. Okay, there was lack of community ownership. The batteries were destroyed. The whole entire infrastructure was down just in a couple of years. And now, what our work was working with that partner and in partnership with the funding from the Italian government was for us to enable that community to see that as their project, take ownership, and begin paying tariffs on it. Okay. So Bongo Hive's role was to create this entrepreneur and business mindset towards this project. It cannot just be relying on grants, but the community has set it up as a business where they pay tariffs. And as it's going to be revived, actually, they're in the process of reviving it through setting up, buying out actually a whole new battery sets for it. We're hoping that that will improve going forward. So those are some of the efforts that we get to chip in when we are supporting rural enterprises and rural communities. Yeah.
God, I love this story because, uh, you know, you hear the stories that somebody, some aid paid for wells or for solar panels, and then a couple of
Yeah.
years later they come back and it's destroyed because nobody had ownership or somebody didn't know how to fix it, so they just gave up. But you never hear the good stories, like you just mentioned, that it can be revived. You just have to um, select a different approach to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's a case of just building that. If you're thinking from the get-go, if you are thinking of the sustainability of a project, not just from an environmental perspective or social perspective, but from a financial perspective, I think that's very, very important. And that's where most projects or even social impact funds, right, get to miss it. So we're talking about investment in entrepreneurs. They are, of course, some people that have, yes, the goal for making financial returns, but there are also other investors that would like to make some impact returns, right? I'm investing in these startups because I see the opportunity for them to scale and grow and potentially employ 10, 15, 20 more people. And that's what I care about as an investor. Even in that approach where those are social funds, you really have to care about the financial sustainability of the project or the startup itself. So, and that's where most grants or social impact funds get to miss it. But if you think about it holistically, so like the project I just mentioned, another part of it was us training local mechanics to partner on the project. The local mechanics and engineers had to go to one of our utility companies called Zesco. They did the training so that you have resources within the community that are able to repair, like people that are actually able to repair any faults that are happening. So yeah, maybe my question to you, Martin, would also be beyond just scams, what do you think could be some potential pitfalls or hurdles that
Mhm.
European entrepreneurs get to face as they seek to invest in African startups?
I would say the hardest thing is that you don't know where to start.
Mm,
Let's say in Czech Republic, I know that there is, like, you guys have bongo hives. We have network of these that are government run or privately owned. So
mm,
you once you get into the community, then it's kind of easy to learn about those things. And then depends on how much money you have, then also limits how much money you can invest,
mm,
because the ceiling is not existent. But when it coming to, let's say, Zambia, before me going there and before me randomly finding you on LinkedIn, I would
mm.
never know that there are such a hubs, or there are such a, like,
Yeah,
innovation centers and so on. So perhaps knowing where to start, knowing what to look for, uh, knowing that there are such a programs as from UNDP, the Timbuktu cities, Timbuktu hubs,
yeah,
as you described previously, and knowing what are the specifics of each country. That Zambia will be the mine tech capital because there is so much
mm,
mining
mm.
going on, and in different cities, different countries have different focuses because they have different history as well and different opportunities. So.
Okay, and maybe to add to that,
Mhm.
Martin, so is it that the interest is already there to potentially invest, but the only challenge is where to start? And
Mhm.
if that was the case, what would it look like in terms of providing this information? Where do we place it? Is it just here? Do we support investors to,
Sure.
like, with a roadmap? I'm thinking of an
Yeah.
investment roadmap in Africa. That would be a good project, by the
Yeah.
way,
Yeah. Yeah.
that we can share. And what would that look like for presenting that information? Yeah.
That's a very good question. I would say, first of all, nobody thinks of it as an opportunity, so nobody looks into it. So
Mm,
there's
mm,
they think there is still so many cool startups to invest in: Czech Republic, Romania, Bulgaria, and so on. But lately, there is more money than there is projects. So even the projects that would not normally get funded, get funded. And if you want to get a discount, you still want to stay within the like European Union regulation space where you can kind of feel like you understand it. And then that's where you go to, like, I invest in, no, not me personally, but those funds could think that I will invest in Romania, Bulgaria, or like if I'm adventurous, then in Serbia or somewhere in Balkans.
Yeah.
But so first of all is to break this barrier of start thinking about African countries not as a bulk, as a continent, but separating maybe safer regulation investment versus super risky just because of the regulation. Doesn't matter what the startup is, but I feel like if you invest in DRC, it will be very hard to chase anybody down, or actually if something happens well with the startup, that pull the money out and so on. So the regulation doesn't allow you to grow essentially, or lure the money in, or in Sudan. So knowing the difference that there is countries like Ghana, Togo, Nigeria, Zambia, Botswana, South Africa, that could be perhaps safer compared to the others. I would say that's the first thing. A second thing is to know where to look, because since I started talking to people from various countries that I'm interested, in Bongo Hives and other startups that come from Africa, and knowing how to work with them together, they started sending me so many random websites that I have no clue what is the point of the website. Like I try to read it, but what are you trying to tell me? It's even more confusing than without reading about it on that website. So therefore, just simplify it. Maybe you can imagine like map of Africa with all the countries with borders that have like 4 different colors: green, orange, red, yellow. Depending on the regulation for startup thing, the conditions. And then maybe connecting with the AfriLabs based on Google Maps, just add the 600 AfriLabs co-working and accelerator spaces there as your point of contact. So if you are interested in a green country with incubator in it, that's part of the AfriLabs network and perhaps part of some greater economic zone, that's where you start afterwards. Maybe showing easily some kind of success stories that you can imagine what kind of startups come from the country. Like you mentioned Lupiya, which is a fintech startup. I'm sure there's a bunch of mining tech startups, health tech startups, and so on. So therefore, maybe showing the specialization of that country based on the track record they have. If maybe showing how many was the number of foreign investment into startups in that country, that can also increase the credibility. If I'm the first one versus if I'm just number 1 million on the list, that just means there were so many different people before me that did it. I don't think the size of an economy as a country has anything to do with it, essentially, because like you said, I feel like Zambia is like an incubator. Like if you prosper in Zambia, it's most likely you will prosper in other countries around as well. So if it works there, it can most likely work in other countries as well. The same case is for Czech Republic. If you start a startup in Czech Republic, if you survive here, you can spread to different countries. But the first goal is to kind of prove the concept in this country. We are also small in the middle. We are connecting whole Europe. All the highways come through us. So it's very, very much similarities between Zambia and Czech Republic, what I see over there. So that's why I also like talking to you, because the cases are so similar. Just different continents.
Absolutely.
So simplifying it and showing some stats with testimonials, maybe of the investors, maybe testimonials of the previous track records of startups that have been invested and moved on, exited, and so on. That could help.
I hear you. That's great. I think you definitely did answer that question. And I just remembered, maybe it's because I'm no longer as involved in projects at the Hive. We're actually working with a partner on an investment pocket guide targeted for African and European investors. That should be released. That should be 3rd week of November. I think that would also be something that would be worth sharing. I do know previously we've worked on the Founder's Guide to Investing, which is just basically a booklet for entrepreneurs that are seeking to raise finance in Africa, in Zambia, and across the world. So we have that Founder's Guide to Investing. But what's missing is that Investor's Guide to investing, right? And with this project, which is the Pocket Guide, it will be a small document, but I think it would give perspective for Zambia. I do know this is happening in other countries as well. South Africa, should be Botswana, and a few others in Southern Africa. So that would be a great insight and something that we can share with anybody who's interested in investing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Perhaps we can also invite that person who is doing it to talk about it on the podcast, because they will be the experts. Maybe they can tell us,
yes,
what are the pockets? Is it, you said it's 300 million people market. Therefore, I'm sure there are some differences between it that we can highlight and learn from.
Absolutely. And I think those people are always excited to come and talk about this stuff. And hopefully this would be a channel for them to also have some access to pipeline. So yeah, that's great. Let's do it and see how we secure that guest invitation. Yeah.
So what would be something that you think people looking in should know? Like people looking in from Europe, from America, from other countries, continents, should know before they get onto this adventure.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that you should know, especially getting over your fears, like you mentioned, Martin, the opportunity is not really presented to the rest of the world for what Africa can offer. I think one thing that you need to understand is that where there's inefficiency across various sectors lies opportunity as well to either standardize those industries, formalize those industries, and create real market value in those particular markets. I mentioned previously, we're at a stage where we're building core infrastructure from finance, logistics, regulation as well. And the next bit in terms of growth for startups will be coming in all of these markets from agriculture, mining, and every other sector. But the core infrastructure is being built. And I think if you're really interested in really investing in African startups, you would do yourself a service to jump on the opportunity while most of these companies are early in their development. So we're ripe for opportunity. Startups are growing across the continent. You could jump and join the movement. Or you could also join us later if you think that's something that would be worth your while. But definitely our markets are growing. We're over 1 billion as a market, as a continent as a whole. And that's a huge market that has got very unique services that they need and products that they would be looking for. So yeah, that's something that I would mention for someone who's thinking about making an investment in Africa.
And please don't hesitate to reach out to Kapvela, to Bongo High.
Yeah, you can shoot me an email or just LinkedIn. I'm very responsive. Just Kabwela Malupande is my LinkedIn as my names are displayed. And you can, let's pick up the conversation from there. Or you can just shoot me an email, kabwela@bongohive.co.zm. I will be able to respond. Yeah.
You guys can find me on LinkedIn as well, Martin Vitek, and I will leave my contact information under this episode as well, my email address, and our upcoming website for this podcast as well. So give it a listen on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other tools where you listen to your favorite podcasts. And we are looking forward to hearing you in the next episode where we connect Africa to Europe and introduce Africa and Europe to investors in their startup ecosystem. Thank you and have a great day.
Thanks for joining us, guys. Take care.